Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to give it a couple more minutes here to allow a couple other people to join, and then we can go ahead and get started. Just wanted to let everyone know that this meeting will be recorded. So if you would like to choose to keep your camera off for any reason, just wanted to let you all know for awareness. Okay, it looks like we got everyone in from the waiting room, so we'll go ahead and get started. So, hi everybody, my name is Bushra. It's nice to meet you all. I will be supporting the FY24 ESSER CROSSACT reporting. So throughout the process, I'll kind of be your main point of contact. If you have any questions or need any support, I'll be your first line of defense throughout the process for any help that you might need. So it's great to meet you all and excited to get this started. Um, Before we kind of jump into the content of the webinar, we ask that you all remain on mute if you're not speaking, just because there will be a lot of attendees, and to kind of help everyone focus on the content that's being presented today. And then we wanted to let you all know that at the end of this session, there will be a Q&A session. So we ask that you save all your questions for the end. But if you do have any questions that come up throughout the presentation, please feel free to add them in the chat. We do have a couple team members that will be monitoring them, monitoring the chat. So we'll take a couple pause points and try to address any questions that we can throughout the presentation. And if you don't want to drop them in the chat, we will have the Q&A session at the end. In terms of any policy or compliance related questions, they should be inquired with MDE. So going ahead and jumping into why we're here today. So we're here for ESSER CrossSec Year 5, which is the government fiscal year 24 reporting. This will be an annual process for CrossSec reporting. So I know some of you were involved in the CrossSec reporting last year. So this will be an annual process until all of the ESSER funds are liquidated. And so for this year, for FY24, this will be representative of school year 2023-2024. So all of the data being asked for is related to school year 2023 to 2024. In terms of what we'll be going through today, we'll be talking about reviewing the report submission guidance, talking about the process and timeline, and making sure that you guys have all of the details and information you need in order to successfully submit. And then for the deadline for the report, school districts will be required to submit by April 18th. So I know this timeline looks a little bit different than last year. For those of you who are involved, the goal here really is to start a little bit earlier and give you all ample time to get through the report, know what it's asking, and submit, and provide a little bit more leeway than there was in previous years. So an overall agenda of everything we'll be going through today is the reporting process and timeline, making sure you all know the key dates. We will be going through the technical guidance, which is an overview and an outline of all of the data being requested. And then we will do a demonstration of a response submission. So this year, the data will be collected through Qualtrics. So we'll do a demonstration so that you all are a little bit familiar with the tool and can successfully submit for this year. And then at the end of the session, we'll be holding a Q&A, helping answer any questions that you might have for the reporting process. So starting off here, February 26th and 27th marks the first thing here, which are the kickoff webinars. So today and tomorrow we'll be hosting kickoff webinars to get all of this information out to you all, which will be recorded and shared with you all once it's available. So you can come back and reference the information as you all need. And then on Friday, following the kickoff webinars, you will receive an email with a Qualtrics invitation and additional information and all of the documents that we talk about today, outlining everything you need to start working on your report submission. And that will kick off the reporting process of you all being able to start putting in that data and submitting it. And all of the initial submissions will be due by April 18th. So once we send that out on Friday, you're free to start working on it, and it will be due by April 18th. Now, once those submissions are sent over, the Accenture team will go through each individual school district submission and review it for any data quality issues, make sure that it's cleared for submission to the federal government. And then jumping over to 5 here, if there are, once we've reviewed your submission, you will either receive an email that validates that your submission is cleared and it's all good to go, and that everything for your district in terms of the reporting is set, or you'll receive an email that outlines any data quality issues that need to be remediated. So if your school district submission does have any remediations, those remediations would be due by May 9th. And whatever resubmission needs to be done will be due by May 9th. Now, with these 2 dates in mind, I do want to point out that all submissions will be due by April 18th. If a resubmission is needed, that will be due by May 9th. Now, here in terms of the Accenture team reviewing those submissions, we will be reviewing them as they come in. So if you submit your submission sooner, then we will get whatever remediation or clearance that you need sooner, and you can still be done by this April 18th deadline. This May 9th deadline is just a cutoff of when those resubmissions need to be done. And then over here in the corner, I just want to point out that during this open period of the school districts being able to submit either their initial submission or resubmission, we will be hosting bi-weekly office hours on Wednesdays starting March 10th. So if you have any questions and want to just pop in and get some help, there will be bi-weekly office hours, and information on the office hours and the meeting invite will be included in the email that goes out to you later this week. Now, after we receive all of those submissions, the Accenture team will go through, validate everything, make sure it's all good for this June 5th deadline to submit to the federal government. I'll stop here and check in with my team if there was any questions regarding the process and timeline.
Nothing in the chat right now, but sure.
All right, awesome. So I will go ahead and continue. So the next thing here is the technical guidance overview. So some of you might be familiar with this from last year, but essentially what the technical guidance is a detailed explanation of all of the data points that are being asked for. So it kind of serves as a guide while you fill out the Qualtrics. So Qualtrics will be where you submit the data. The technical guidance is a guide that you'll have open while working on the Qualtrics and inputting that data. So it provides detailed explanations of each of the data attributes, and to help you all use the technical guidance while filling out Qualtrics. They both follow the same exact order to make it synchronous and a little bit easier to follow the flow. And what I'll show you a little bit later in the Qualtrics demonstration is that there will be column references for each question in Qualtrics to reference the technical guidance. So to help you all get a better idea of what the technical guidance looks like, I want to walk through so that you all are aware of each individual ask of data for the report. So this is what it will look like when you open it up. So between columns 6 and 11, this is provided by the federal government. So it'll include the name of the data attribute being asked for, like what is being asked for here. It'll include the data type. So is it a number that's being asked? Is it a true or false question? What kind of number is being asked here? Can it have a decimal? That sort of thing. And then it'll include an example value and and an explanation. So if we go through column D here for an example, what's being asked for is your DUNS number. And for the data type, it'll say a 9-string character. So then it'll provide an example value, and the example value is like 9 nines here. And then I want to point out here that in row 11, the attribute name, that is more for the federal government consolidating all of the information on their end. So the attribute name here is nothing for you all to worry about. It's just more of a reference. And then in in row 13, it will have an explanation of what the attribute is asking. So for example, for the DUNS number, a 9-character DUNS number associated with the subrecipient being your school district. Here you would essentially input the 9-digit DUNS number associated with your school district. And one more thing to point out is that as you're going through here, everything being asked for is for school year 2023 to 2024. So E and F here resemble what is being asked for in column D. So I'm going to go ahead and jump over here to column G. So what G is asking for is this entity an LEA? So it's a true or false question. You would answer true or false. And then in the explanation here, you will see it asks whether the subrecipient is considered a local education agency, an LEA, or a public service academy, PSA. So I wanted to make sure to point out that it doesn't say PSA here in what the federal guidance provided, but in the explanation here, you'll say it also includes whether or not it's a PSA. So now jumping over to this next section here, the columns H through O are all asking about FTE information regarding your LEA throughout different years. So 2018, 2019. And in the attribute instructions, it says the data for this section will be inputted using the CEPI Michigan schools data collected by Michigan. And what I will show you all when we head over into Qualtrics, it won't actually give you the option to input any data here because the Accenture team is going to go ahead and get that data and input it for your school district. But it will provide an explanation, or it will provide each of the data attributes that are being asked for. But in terms of H through O, you don't need to worry about inputting that data yourself. Jumping over to this next section here, starting with column P, the header question here is asking, did the LEA expend ESSER funds on any of the items below in the current period? The current period being school year 2023-2024. So if we go to P here, the first section, it's asking whether the LEA expended ESSER funds on promoting vaccinations. So for each of these sections, you would go ahead and put true or false for each of the categories. So for promoting vaccination, consistent and correct mask use, and so on through the rest of the categories here. And those will all be true or false. So column Y here marks the next question, which is, did the LEA use ESSER funds to provide home internet access or for any students in the current reporting period? True or false? So in school year 2023-2024, did your district use ESSER funds to provide internet home access? And so here, true or false, for the sake of the example, if we say your district did do it, you would put true. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the report last year, there will be additional questions asked if your district did provide home internet access. So in this next section, C, this marks the start of a subsection related to providing home internet service. One thing I want to point out before jumping into it is Qualtrics will automatically present additional questions if you need to answer it based on your previous answer. So if you put true, your LEA did expend ESSER funds on home internet services, then Qualtrics will present this next subset of questions. But if you mark false here, it'll skip over to that next section and not present the subset of sections related to home internet services. So we know last year this created a lot of data quality issues and back and forth and required a lot of resubmission. So with Qualtrics now, you will only see the question if you need to answer it. So if you did answer true, this next subset of questions would show up starting with C, which asks what type of home internet services were provided by the district using ESSER funds. So this first example here is mobile hotspots with paid data plans. So true or false, with the funds that were expended on home internet use, was mobile hotspots with paid data plans a part of that? So for each of these subcategories here, you would go in and put true or false. So was internet connected devices with paid data plans true or false? And that would be the same for all of these categories. Now, jumping over to AF, the next question, did the LEA seek to re-engage students with poor attendance or participation? True or false? And just like the previous section we went through, there will be a subset of sections based on that. So if you answer true, Qualtrics will present you with the subset of sections related to it. If you answer false, it'll skip over to that next section. So just like the last section, how did the LEA re-engage with students with poor attendance or participation? For each of these subcategories, direct outreach to families, you would put true or false. So did your LEA re-engage students with poor attendance or participation through direct outreach to families in school year 2023-2024? And you would go through each of these categories, marking those. So jumping over to this next section here, AO.
Hey, Bushra.
Yeah.
Real quick, we have a couple questions in the chat that I think we can address. So Joanna was asking about if her school district expended all of their funds prior to FY24, do they still need to report for the FY24 reporting period? And the short answer is yes. Since your school district received ESSER funds at any point in the past years and expended them prior to FY24, we still need to submit this report for your district. However, when you go through and complete this report, most of your questions are going to be false because you didn't actually expend the funds within the school year 23-24. Now, there are some other data attributes that the federal government is asking for that you may still need to populate, such as general unique enrollment figures of your school district for school year 23-24, as well as some student population demographic metrics as well. So the short answer is yes, you still need to complete the report.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. Any other questions before we jump back in?
Yes, there is another question from Eric. I'm not exactly sure which section he's asking or referencing, but he's saying with the attendance, is that asking whether we used ESSER money for that or just in general? So Eric, if you don't mind, could you provide some context on which section you were asking that about?
I believe it was this section, Dan, the how did the LEA seek to re-engage students with poor attendance or participation? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so that's going to be specific to each individual question. So for school year 23 or 24, did the LEA re-engage students with poor attendance or participation specifically for the avenue of direct outreach to families? So it's not necessarily in general. It's asking for each of these different types. So A, B, C, D. Did the district conduct that activity? So he's asking if you used funds or just conducted the activity.
So the question is with this section, are they trying to find out whether we used ESSER funds to re-engage students with poor participation, or are they trying to determine whether we did, period? Because those are two different questions.
Yeah, I believe it is. Did you use any ESSER funds in relation to those activities? Diego, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're right. Let me do a little digging in the background and I will get us an answer.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions before we jump back in?
Yes, one quick one. Are ISDs required to complete this report? I believe the answer is no for that. Correct, Diego? For sure.
Yeah. ISDs are not required to complete the report.
Yeah, it's just PSAs or LEAs. I believe that's it for now, Busher. Sorry to interject the flow.
No, perfect. Happy to answer some of the questions. All right, jumping back into it, we left off here at column AO. So this question is asking, did the LEA allocate some portion of ESSER funds to schools in this reporting period? So in 2023, 2024, were ESSER funds allocated to schools? So true or false? And similar to like the previous two questions that we asked, if this is true, there will be a subset of questions that follow here. So the sub question is the criteria used to allocate funds to schools within the LEA. So for each of these categories, you would want to answer true or false. So starting with AP here, the flat amount per school or per pupil, true or false, or the number of proportion of students at the school with specific curricular needs, such as students with disabilities or English learners, true or false. So if true, you did it, they want a little bit more information about what the criteria used to allocate the funds to the LEA looked like. So for each of these subcategories, you're going to want to answer true or false. Now, jumping over to this next section here, starting with AX, they ask the total amount expended for specific staff, and this is cumulative across all ESSER funds. So all ESSER funds included, they ask for the dollar amount that was expended for specific staff. And then the next section here, starting with AY, they want to indicate the total number of these specific staff positions supported with any of the ESSER funds for the current reporting period, school year 2023-2024. And the support indicates salaries and or benefits that were partially or fully paid for with ESSER funds. So whether partially or fully, you would account that role. And then for each of the roles, they ask how many of the roles were supported. So AY being the first one here, special educators and related services personnel, you would want to indicate the number of roles that were supported. So in this example here, it's 4. And then you would go down the list for all the other types of roles that are specified, like paraprofessionals, bilingual or English as second language educators, and so on down the list. Now, the next section here starts with BH and goes through, and I'm going to scroll here just so you guys kind of get the full picture, goes through BU. So the top question here is asking for the total LEA student enrollment by demographic subgroup. So in your LEA, what was the total LEA student enrollment for each of the subgroups that are specified below. So for each of the categories here, you would want to put what your enrollment for the subgroup was. So BH, the first subgroup being asked about is students with one or more disabilities, and then you would enter the number of students in your LEA enrolled that falls in this category. BI, low income students, and so on. One thing I want to point out is that your total enrollment numbers are going to be used in the rest of the report. So whatever numbers you put in here are going to be referenced. So I just wanted to point that out, and I'm going to walk you all through what that looks like. So for the sake of this example, I ask that you all just keep that 730 number in mind to kind of help paint the picture of the next set of questions. So if I'm a school district filling this out, I'm saying that in my LEA, the total enrollment of students with one or more disabilities is 730 students. And so you would go through and add that for each of these questions or each of these subcategories. So white, two or more races. And one other thing I wanted to point out in this section here is BU asks for other student population. So if you have students enrolled that fall outside of the categories listed, you're going to want to select you're going to want to input the number of students that fall in the other student population. And then, like we said in previous questions, where Qualtrics will present the question if you need to. If you do have students that fall in the other student population, you will be shown this question that asks to specify the other student population. So for example, here, if you have migrant students, you're going to want to put for the explanation, like you have 5 students that fall in the other student population, and that as an explanation, the other student population is migrant students. So you will be asked to specify what the other category looks like. And that will be true for all of the questions that ask about the demographic questions. And then at the end here is BW, which asks for the total unique headcount of enrolled students. So whatever the total unique headcount for your LEA is, you're going to want to put that in here. And then I do want to point out that, for example, here, you can have a student that is a student with one or more disabilities and who is Asian. So for example, that student would fall in both of those categories, but that total unique head count is rather than that student being counted twice, they're only being counted once. So it's that total unique head count of enrolled students at your LEA. So this next section here is asking about interventions within your LEA, and we're going to go through each of those. But before we jump in those, I see that there's some questions coming through the chat, so I'm going to pause and ask my team, are there any questions right now that we should go through before jumping into the interventions?
Yeah, we do have one question we haven't addressed from Leslie. She asked, as of what date do we enter enrollment, fall count or spring count?
So that's a good question. So what you're going to want to do is when there's additional questions in terms of like interventions, and that's recording the different number of students, you're going to want to put the highest enrollment numbers for your school districts so that there isn't like any discrepancies in terms of like the number of students served. So essentially throughout the entire school year,
Yes.
you're going to want to,
The whole wall. What
oh,
about your
sorry.
is it
If
okay?
you're not, could you mute, please?
Door entrance windows? All right. Gotcha.
But so essentially, I apologize. So essentially, you're going to want to put the highest enrollment numbers for each of the subcategories, not specifically like fall or spring. Does that kind of answer the question?
Leslie, does that answer your question?
Yeah, she responded in the chat the last time they were told. The process is a little bit different this year. So this year we will be going with the highest count to avoid, as Bushra indicated, any discrepancies with students participating in specific interventions, so that, you know, a lower number would not be flagged if there were more students, say, during the summer, and those students participated in a program by the U.S. Department of Education. Just to go back to the question about whether or not the re-engagement of students with poor attendance participation was reliant on the spending of ESSER funds. So the requirement is to indicate, and I'll just read it straight from the guidance from US Ed, to provide a response for each LEA, including this reporting period, regardless of whether ESSER funds were expended on this activity. So for that section particularly, they are just asking whether or not those activities took place.
Great. Thank you, Diego. Eric, I believe
Yep.
you asked that question. You have the clarification there? Okay, looks like Eric's good on that. One other quick one, and then we can move on. Jamie, I believe it, yeah, Jamie Johnston is asking about the demographic enrollment figures as well as unique headcount. Bushra, so if you can go back to that section. Just to clarify, so for the demographics section, one individual student could fall under multiple demographics. And I believe I put that in the chat. So for example, I could be an Asian student that also has one or more disabilities. So that isn't necessarily a quote unquote unique headcount. That is just the total number of students that fall under one or more of those categories. Now, when we scroll to the right and they're asking specifically total unique headcount, that would be the unique count of students enrolled within your LEA or PSA. That is not an FTE number. Does that help answer the question, Jamie?
Yes, thank you.
You bet. All right, Bushra, we can keep moving.
All right, awesome. So starting here, so as I previously mentioned, this next part of the report is asking about 7 different type of interventions, and we'll go through each one of them. So the first one here starts with BX. So what is asking is, how did the LEA use ESSER funds to support learning recovery or acceleration for student groups who are disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic? So for all of the interventions here. So the first one being evidence-based summer learning or summer enrichment program. So true or false, did your LEA expend ESSER funds for evidence-based summer learning or summer enrichment programs in school year 2023-2024? Now, I'm going to walk through with the example values here so you guys kind of get a sense of how the report works. So if we say yes, true, my LEA did use funds for evidence-based summer learning or summer enrichment programs, there will be additional questions for me to answer, which again, Qualtrics will automatically take care of for you. So the next question I will see is this a program available to all students? So the example here is false. So I have this program at my LEA, but it's not available to all students. The next question I will be asked is, if no, indicate the number of students this program serves at full capacity. So in my LEA, I'm saying that there are 350 students that my program can serve at full capacity. This next question here, C8, will ask for the total unique headcount of students that participated in this activity. So I know Dan just gave a little bit of an explanation of what that total unique headcount looks like and how it's like calculated. So here you'd want to put the total unique headcount of students that participated in this activity. Now, starting with CB, is where we will see the reference to those demographic numbers that were included before. So if you remember, I had previously asked you to keep in mind that at my LEA, I'm reporting that I have 730 students with one or more disabilities. So starting with CB, what you're going to see for each demographic subgroup, it's going to ask for the number of enrolled eligible students at the LEA in the subgroup, so in CB. And then in CC, it's going to ask for the number of students in the subgroup participating. So if I scroll back here a little bit, I indicated that my LEA does have this program and that it is not available to all students. So if I look here in CB, the number of enrolled eligible students in the subgroup, I put 650. So if we compare that to the fact that in my LEA, I have 730 students with one or more disabilities, this number is going to have to be less than the number of students enrolled in my LEA. Now, it doesn't have to be specifically this subgroup, but at least for one of my subgroups, if it's not available to all of my students, then the number of eligible students for this program for at least one of the subcategories is going to have to be less than my enrollment. So if I have 730 students, then and it's not available to all of them, one of the value is going to be less than. And so for my example, it's just falls within this subcategory. This could apply to any of the subcategories here. And so you will do this for each of the subgroups that were asked about in the total demographics. So for low-income students, you're going to put the number of eligible students, enrolled eligible students in the subgroup, and then the number that participated. And you will do this for all of the following subcategories, including the other population. So I'm just going to scroll through here so that you all can get a sense of what this kind of looks like. And then additionally, I want to point out that here in DD, following the other population, if you do have students that fall in that other population, you will be asked to just specify what the other subpopulation is. Now, going to the second intervention, it starts here with DE, which is evidence-based after-school programs. So did your LEA have evidence-based after-school programs in school year 2023-2024? For my example, I'm going to put true, because if I put false, it'll just kind of skip me to the next section. But I'm going to say my LEA did have evidence-based after-school programs. The next question here in DF is going to say, is this program available to all students? I'm going to say that this program was available to all students at my LEA. So if you're scrolling through the technical guidance as you're filling out the Qualtrics, you're going to see DG here, which asks to indicate the number of students if it wasn't available to all students, but Qualtrics will skip over that question. So you're not going to see it because it doesn't apply to your district, because you said it was available to all students. So Qualtrics is just not going to show you this question at all. It's going to skip over to DH, which is the total unique head count of students that participated in this activity, and then jump over to the demographic breakdown for this intervention. So DI, for each of the following subgroups, you're going to want to answer the demographic information. So in DI, it's asking for the number of enrolled eligible students at the LEA in the subgroup. So if you remember, in my total demographic earlier on in the report, I said I have 730 students with one or more disabilities. So if my program is available to all the students at my school, then the number of enrolled eligible students for my program must be equal to my total demographics. So since I had 730 students with one or more disabilities, then 730 students with one or more disabilities are enrolled eligible students at my LEA in this subgroup. Now your participating number will be whatever your participating number looked like for this program. And I do want to just call out that, like, whatever your participating number is, it has to be less than or equal to whatever you put for the enrolled eligible student. So for example, if I have 730 students that are enrolled eligible, I can't have 1,000 students with one or more disabilities participating because I only have 730 enrolled at my school district. So Qualtrics is going to make sure that that number is less than or equal to. So I just want to make sure to call that out for you all. And so this will be the case for all of the programs or all of the subgroup demographics here. So for low-income students, it must be equal to whatever I put in my total demographic. And what I'll show you guys in the Qualtrics demonstration a little bit later, we do have whatever numbers you inserted in the total demographic will show up with each intervention so that you can reference it as you're filling out the report and not needing to like scroll back. But I just want to call that out, that will be there, and I'll show you all that once we jump over to Qualtrics. Now, jumping over to the third intervention here, I'm scrolling through because this is all the subgroup information that was related to intervention 2. So if I jump over to intervention 3, EL, it's asking for extended instructional time, including extended school day or school week or school year. This will be true or false. And since this section kind of mirrors the previous 2 sections, for the sake of this example, I'm going to say false. And so if your LEA did not have extended instructional time, it'll jump over to the next intervention, which is intervention number 4 here. So intervention number 4, FD, is asking whether or not your LEA had evidence-based high dosage tutoring in school year 2023-2024. And this section also mirrors the previous 2 sections that we went through. So if you answer true, you will have a subset of questions. False, or like, is this program available to all students? You would put true or false. You would, if for in this example we have false, so an FF, you would be asked if no, indicate the number of students this program serves at full capacity, followed by the total unique headcount, and then the breakdown of the subgroup information. So I'm going to go ahead and jump over to intervention 5 over here. So intervention 5 starts with GK here. So early childhood education program expansion or enhancement. So whether your LEA had early childhood education program expansion or enhancement, you would answer true or false. In this example, we have true. My LEA did have early childhood education program expansion or enhancement. So I would be asked these subset of questions. So it's asking, did the LEA expand its early childhood program? You would answer true or false. If this were true, you would be asked how many additional students or slots were funded in the most recent school year. So this would still be school year 2023-2024. And then in GN, you would be asked, did it enhance its early childhood program? So the first one asking if it was expanded, the second one asking if it was enhanced. And then in GO here, the total unique headcount of students that were enrolled in an early childhood education program at the LEA. And then following that, starting with GP, you would be asked for the number of students enrolled in an early childhood education program within the LEA for each demographic subgroup. So you would go ahead and add those in. And again, have to specify whatever the other population is if you do have one. And then is intervention 6. So HE is asking whether or not the LEA expended ESSER funds on full service community schools in school year 2023-2024. You would answer true or false. If true, you will have the subset of questions from HF to HH here. So HF is asking, how many new or additional full service community schools were launched using these funds in this LEA. So you would indicate the number of those. HG asks how many current full service community schools received additional services or support using these funds. And then HH is asking what is the total enrollment in full service community schools supported with ESSER funds within the LEA. So you would just go ahead and add each of those numbers. The last intervention here starts with HI, which asks whether or not your LEA expended ESSER funds for purchasing educational technology in school year 2023-2024. So you would answer true or false here. If true, the subset of questions will begin at HJ. So it'll ask, was the educational technology purchased for all students? If true, you would actually be done with the report and there won't be any additional questions. If false, you'll have the additional questions asking to indicate the number of students that received the technology. And then there will be the demographic breakdown question starting with HL that asks the number of enrolled eligible students at the LEA in the subgroup. So you would want to put that here. And then in HM, the enrolled eligible students in the subgroup that received the support by the educational technology. And you would do that for each of the demographic subgroups that we went through. So that is all for the technical guidance. We wanted to walk through and make sure you all had an idea of all of the attributes that are being asked. So I'll pause here and check in with my team to see if there are any questions.
Hey, Bushra, I believe we have addressed all the questions besides one that Stephanie just pinged. She asked, when will we receive access to the survey, i.e. Qualtrics data collection?
So that will be sent out Friday. So once we've completed the kickoff webinars, we will be sending the Qualtrics link with the technical guidance and all the other documents. The webinar recording will be sent once it's made available. So we can't promise that it will be ready by Friday, but we'll make sure to get the webinar recording out as soon as possible. But you will still have the Qualtrics link by Friday.
So last year I received the survey directly, but this year the webinar went to my superintendent and the email did not come to me. So do I have to tell my superintendent to make sure to watch out for it? I'm just not sure how you're determining who's receiving these emails.
Yeah, so all initial communications for the report went out to superintendents. And in the email, we asked that if the superintendent wasn't the one to fill it out, or if there will be other people involved in the process to kind of let us know. So what I can do is I will drop my email here in the chat. And if you send me an email with the Nexus ID for your school district, I will go ahead and add you to the comms so that you can receive it directly and don't need to worry about like the middle communication.
I believe you said Nexus, but I think you meant NCES number.
I
correct?
did mean NCES. Thanks, Dan.
John had a follow-up about Section 11T funding. That is considered ESSER ARP. ESSER ARP reserve fund. So yes, that does fall within the scope of this CROSSACT report, hence the name. It's a cross report across all of ESSER. So that's ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER ARP. 98C specifically, there's been a couple of questions about that. I personally am not even familiar with that program. I don't believe that falls under ESSER. Correct, Diego?
Yet, could anybody come off mute and just talk about what 98C was intended to address?
I think it was for learning loss.
Got it.
Yeah, the state provided the grant for learning loss, then you could use
Yeah.
this one for before and after school programs and such.
So I think a lot of
Okay.
people just have the question, are state grants that were provided, because like 98C, like the last couple of years, we've had a ton of grants that were provided by the gear funding that was provided to the governor and for ESSER funding that was left over. So I think a lot of people are just wondering, are any of these state grants needing to be included in this reporting? Or is it just purely the ESSER 1, the ESSER 2, the ARP, homeless funding?
Okay, yeah, thank you for the clarification. So if it wasn't part of your original allocation from the ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ESSER 3 mandatory reserve grants, then it is not included in this report. So especially gear specifically, so anything that came from the state as a part of gear funding would not be included or part of whether or not the funds were expended on a specific intervention.
Correct. There's a separate report that MDE will submit specifically related to gear.
Okay, I do want to make sure we have enough time to show you all Qualtrics. So, Dan Diego, if it's okay, I'll jump into Qualtrics and then we can address anything else in the Q&A session at the end. So we've been talking about Qualtrics the whole time. So I want to give you guys a little walkthrough of what it will look like. Knowing that it's asking everything that was in the technical guidance, it's just the data submission tool we'll be using. So I know I went ahead and dropped my email in the chat. You also should be receiving emails from me if like your contact information was shared with me if you're not a superintendent. But if not, please save it from the chat. And then once you open up Qualtrics, you'll see my email right here. So any questions that you need, please feel free to reach out to me directly. And then you can just go ahead and jump into the Qualtrics. So at the beginning here, we ask that you put in your information. That way, when there is like a remediation request, we know how to contact you and reach out. The phone number here is optional if you want to include that. So if I go in here to the next section, it'll start asking, starting with column C of the technical guidance. So you'll have the data attribute that's being asked for, and then you'll have the technical guidance reference, as well as the example value that's provided in the technical guidance. So as you're going through it, you can easily reference and move back and forth with the technical guidance, but to reference it. So if I go here, just for the sake of the example here, adding in the values that are being asked for. So you'll see that it'll ask the data attribute. So DUNS number, please enter a 9-digit number, technical guidance values. And so if I am inputting this information here, and I try to go to the next section, Qualtrics has all of these built-in controls to help make sure your initial submission is in best shape possible. So I'm getting an error message here on please enter a 7-digit number or integer. So if I look back here, I see that I only inputted 6 digits. So I will fix that. And now Qualtrics will allow me to move on to the next section. And if you all recall, in the technical guidance, it said that you don't need to input any data for the FTEs and that the Accenture team will do it. So in order to move on to the next question, you just need to select each bubble. And then you can go ahead and move on to the next section. If you don't select one, it'll just say response required. You select it, and then you can move on to the next question. So I know we walked through these already, so I'm just going to go ahead and select a couple random answers just so that we can get to some of the more important examples I want to show you all. So for this example here, it's asking whether the LEA used ESSER funding to provide home internet service. So if I put true, it's going to ask me a subset of questions related to the home internet service. But let's say I'm like, oh shoot, actually my LEA did not do this. There are forward and back buttons here to navigate through the Qualtrics. So I can go back, I can put false, And what it'll do is actually skip those subset questions. So the ones that we just saw, since I said false, Qualtrics isn't going to show me those questions, and it's going to jump over to the next question in the technical guidance. So here, seeking to re-engage students, if I put true, it'll show me those subset of questions, and then I just have to go through answering true or false for each of the sections. So this is an example of it asking to describe other strategies. I'm just going to write strategies for the sake of the example, and then I could move on. And then these sections all kind of mirror each other. So what I'm going to do is, oh, here we go. Sorry. So here it's asking to provide the total amount expended for staff. So let's say 200. And then it's going to ask for the number of positions. So here, for example, right, a number is required. So if I try to put in like a word, put in my name, it's not going to work. It's going to give me an error message here to say, please make sure all values are up to 1 decimal. So if I go back and change that to number, I can go through. Now, as we were talking about the total demographic questions, I was telling you all that it will show you whatever you put into the total demographics, since those numbers are referenced in the interventions. So I'm going to go ahead and just put 2 for all of these to show you all what that will look like later on with the interventions. And I'm just going to quickly skip through these. So here is the first intervention of evidence-based summer learning or summer enrichment. So if I say my program did have this, and then if it's available to all students, so I'm going to say this was available to all students. You're going to see a lot of text, and I know it might be a little bit daunting, but I wanted to break it down with you all of the 2 questions being asked here. So first is to provide the total unique headcount of students that participated in the evidence-based learning. So there are 2 situations where the program is available to all students, or if it's not. For this example, we put it was available to all students. So if I go to the validation criteria, it says if the program was available to all students, the number of participating students should be less than or equal to the total unique headcount of students. You previously reported 210. So whatever you put in for the total unique headcount will show up for you to reference so that you don't have to scroll through the entire Qualtrics. And it will tell you what the conditions for that value should look like. And that will helpfully reduce any data quality issues that might come up. So I know that if my total unique headcount is 210, this number can't be 300 because it has to be less than or equal to. So I'm going to go ahead and put 200. Now this is what the example that is asking for the total demographic questions is going to look like. So it'll say, please provide the count of enrolled eligible students and the count of participating students for this intervention. So it'll say, so there's a note here that please note next to each subgroup, previously reported total enrollment numbers for each subgroup is in parentheses for reference. For example, students with 1 or more disability, and it will have whatever value you put in for that. So if I just jump down here real quick, each subgroup is listed, and then in parentheses, whatever I put previously in Qualtrics will show up in parentheses, so I can easily reference that number. Now, for the validation criteria, there will always be an explanation if it was available to all students or if it wasn't. For this example, we said it was available to all students. So it says the validation criteria is the number of students enrolled, the number of enrolled eligible students for each subgroup should be equal to the total enrollment number for each subgroup in parentheses. So since my program was available to all students, then the enrolled eligible students has to be equal to my total demographic in parentheses. And your participating just needs to be less than or equal to. So like, again, if I have 2 students in each category, I can't have 3 students participating. If I only have 2 Hispanic or Latino students enrolled in my LEA, I can't have more than 2 that are eligible for my program. And let's say any of the numbers don't line up, you're going to get an error message saying you have one issue to fix. The error message is going to say, please see validation criteria in red below, and it will provide you with the validation criteria. And if I go back and look at my numbers, comparing everything in parentheses, I know it has to be equal. So my other population, I put 0. So actually, my enrolled eligible students has to be 0. And since I don't have any students that fall in this subcategory, my participating also has to be 0. And then that will be true throughout the rest of the Qualtrics. So just a couple final notes about Qualtrics itself. You can close it and come back and it'll auto save if you're in the middle of filling it out. So you don't have to worry about losing all the data if you have to stop and go do something. And you will receive a link. You will receive an email with your submission. Sorry, you will receive an email that provides an attachment that includes whatever you submitted for the LEA, and it'll use whatever email you put and for the initial contact in the beginning of the Qualtrics. So I know we hit that 1 hour mark and we promised you a Q&A session. So me and my team will hang on for any questions that you guys might have. I know we answered some throughout. So I really appreciate you all joining us today and taking the time to kind of get all the details you need for the report. So I will go ahead and stop and check in with my team on any questions that are coming through. And please feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions as well. I do see a question that says, can we get a copy of a blank Excel sheet to help in the process? Is this in terms of the technical guidance? And I think that's from Jamie. Oh, I see Dan and Diego are on top of responding to this.
Yeah. So let me add the context there. So just to be clear, the technical guidance is the federal template that the federal government releases, and then ourselves and MDE have added in additional clarification on what each of the data attributes the federal government is asking for. So that technical guidance document, if you need to work cross-functionally within your district to obtain that information, that would be the best document to share with your team at your district, because that technical guidance document directly mirrors what will ultimately be submitted within Qualtrics. It is a one-to-one match across front to back. Does that answer the question? Great. Any other questions? Again, keep in mind, if you guys, walk away today and start the process to compile the data to ultimately submit the report and questions come up, just a reminder, Bushra is going to be hosting bi-weekly office hour sessions for any and all questions that you may have. You can join that session. If it's a more complex question, we can walk through it in detail. And she's also going to be available via email as well. When should we expect to get this document to fill out? So we have 4 webinar sessions between today and tomorrow. So we will get you the Qualtrics link to actually start compiling the report as early as this Friday. This Friday being February 28th. That also includes the technical guidance document. She will attach that within the email that she's sending the Qualtrics link.
Yeah, and it will also have the office hour links. It will essentially be a follow-up with everything we kind of talked about today, and then including the link to the Qualtrics. So you'll kind of get everything with the exception of the webinar recording in Friday's email. Any other questions? Please feel free to either raise your hand or drop it in the chat. Thank you for adding Qualtrics this year. You are very welcome. We're hoping this helps make the process easier on you all. Yes, Jamie, I see you have your hand raised.
When you start filling out this report, does it auto-save or can you come back to it at a later time?
Yes. So if you're like halfway through and you close it, it'll auto save and like whatever progress you've made will remain there. So you can just jump back into where you left off with it.
Now, keep in mind that's for the individual submitter. So when you click that link and you start filling out that report on your laptop or desktop, it will be unique to your cookies. So for example, if you want somebody else from your district to be able to log in and see the progress, it's going to have to be done specifically by you if you are the submitter.
Thank you.
And just to be sure, if you want to pause and come back, I would just make sure you don't clear any of your cookies on your browser or your history on your browser. Let's see, I think we have some coming in through the Q&A. Bushra. Oh, it says it's not available now.
Tracy, I see your email about not being let in. I apologize. I'm not really sure what happened, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the links to register for the other 3 times for the webinar. Other webinars, we have 1 later today and 2 tomorrow. If you're not able to make any of them, we will be sending out a recording once it's made available. But I apologize for any mix-up that didn't allow you into the call. I see a question here asking when is the report due? So all submissions need to be submitted by April 18th. So once we send out the Qualtrics link on Friday, you will have until April 18th, the latest, to submit. And then while submissions are coming in, my team will be reviewing them for any issues. If there are any issues, all issues need to be remediated by May 9th, but all submissions need to be submitted by April 18th. Any other questions? All right, well, my team and I will be hanging around for a little bit if you all do have any questions. So we'll kind of just hang out here, but if you don't have any other questions, then just keep a heads out for any communication on Friday that will include everything we talked about today. But thank you all again for joining. So I see a question here from Jim. How would the submitter share access to Qualtrics? So Qualtrics will actually be a public link, and there's no access that's needed to be shared. If you have the link, you can fill out the Qualtrics. So there's no concerns regarding actual access for it.
Keep in mind, though, we want to try to avoid duplicate submissions. Okay, so if you need to work internally within your district, again, to compile the data that is being requested, the best document to share with your team would be the technical guidance. Just to avoid duplicate submissions, I think it would be best to have a responsible party who is the individual owner and submitter for your district. If you need to have conversations about requesting data, again, the technical guidance is a one-to-one match to Qualtrics, so that would be the best document to circulate within your district to begin compiling and gathering that requested data. So we will hang on the line for another about 4 minutes. If you don't have any other questions, feel free to drop. If you want to hang around until 11:15, in case there are some nuggets of questions that are asked, you're more than welcome, but we will conclude at 11:15 Eastern. I still see there's a couple of folks on the line. Any questions that are coming up as you're thinking about this year's process? Okay.
All right.
So if there's no additional questions, just for purposes of the recording, we are going to conclude the event. So we are going to wrap this up in a couple of seconds here. Just want to give you all a final opportunity to ask any questions before we conclude.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining.
All right.
All
Looks
right.
like we can wrap. I just kicked the last couple out.
Okay.
All right. Good work, Bushra. I got to run.
Thank you. All right. I'll see you
Bye.
later. Bye.
Yep. Bye.